power of the sword if they have to. Jihad comes in several stages, by the pen, by finances, and by the sword as well. So it came to establish jihad, and if you look at every single Muslim demonstration, the war is with the Christian world. They don't differentiate between Presbyterian, Pentecostal, Catholic. They were all the Christian world. That's how they view America.
It's almost unbelievable that a woman is living in a situation where she's virtually a possession and not a person. But that's the way it is.
That's the way it is. In fact, my sister is married. She's covered from head to toe. She lives in Saudi Arabia. Her husband one time beat her up. And I asked her, and she says, well, it was for disobedience. I didn't obey him, so he beat me up. So, as a Muslim, I told her, well, you better start obeying your husband. I didn't, question my brother-in-law. I never questioned my father as he beat my mother. And the beatings my mother received is, infinitesimal to what you're talking about abuse here. A husband has the right to beat his wife, but it forbids to beating on the face, however. Some clergy forbid that, but there is wives beating.
Well, we're going to be right back in just a moment. I want you to stay tuned for this word from our announcer, and we'll be back with Waleed because he has some exciting things to tell you. Thank you so very much. I want to introduce to you the most urgent and important sermon series I have ever preached. World War III has begun. In this sermon, I describe the religious war that threatens the future of America. President Bush has said this nation is at war with Islamofascism. It is life or death. We want to live, and the Islamofascists want to die in a holy war. When did this war start? In the sermon, I say why we were attacked. Can we lose this war? What does losing this war mean to you and to America? The second sermon is from Abraham to Armageddon. In the third sermon, I talk about the judgment of the nations. I want you to get this series and let your family, your friends, and church members hear it. It's a wake-up call for America.
To order Pastor John Hagee's sermon series, World War III has begun. Call and ask for offer S0634. All three sermons are available on audio cassette, CD, and VHS or DVD.
Thank you for rejoining us. Waleed, tell us the impact of the Six-Day War on your life. I know that the Arab media was announcing that the Arab armies had driven the Jews out of Jerusalem when in fact Jewish tanks were on the outskirts of Cairo, Egypt, and rumbling down the streets of Jordan. Tell us the impact of the Six-Day War on your life.
I recall when the media was saying we cleansed Jerusalem from all the Jews after the battle was over. We opened the doors and we saw the Israeli tanks with the Star of David. And I remember asking my father, in the streets, they have already gotten to Jerusalem and even got all the way to Jericho. And I asked my father, I said, this is not the flag we salute. And he said, we've lost the war. Of course, my mother was very happy because she was still a Christian. She still had faith. And my father asked her, why are you so happy? And she says, well, we took this in Sunday school, that this will happen. In fact, Psalm 83 is very clear. Joshua had a 6-day war as well. Because if you look at the text, it says on the 7th day, early in the morning, the children of Israel went around the walls of Jericho 7 times, and the walls fell down.
Wonderful.
So we've lived, all of us, a parallel to Joshua's war. We as Christians sometimes we think, well, God speaks to us personally. Well, he does, but he speaks to the whole world as well. This was a message from God to the whole world that he's established Jerusalem as his capital, as the capital for Israel. Yet we didn't see this as Muslims. But when I read Psalm 83, it astonished me. When I read Amos chapter 9 verse 15, and I will plant them in their land, and no longer shall they be pulled out of that land. We tried in Yom Kippur, we tried in the 6 Days War, we tried many wars. We never succeeded because of that single promise that God gave in the book of Amos.
Yes. Now, I would like for you to share with our audience the role of the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem in bringing Hitler's hatred of the Jews to the Arab Islamics. Many Americans cannot connect that dot. But the fact is, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem was in fact the chief spiritual leader, if you will, of the Arab people, and that he was received by Hitler in Berlin and received by Goebbels, the Minister of Propaganda, and many of the things that Hitler did with his Nazis, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem did in fact take it back and give it to the Arab people, the Islamic people, to use against the Jews.
Yes.
Now, what are the similarities that Hitler brought to the Grand Mufti that have followed in Islam from that point until now?
What Americans need to understand is the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. He was a good friend of my grandfather.
He was a friend of your
Absolutely.
grandfather.
He used to come visit our home. He gets his sources from the Umar Covenant, the Umar Declaration. Umar ibn al-Khattab was the second caliph in Islam. He was the friend of Muhammad, the prophet.
Yes.
That's where the source comes from. We have to put that in perspective.
So he's connected.
Yes, so it's not just some offshoot of Islam here. This guy just on his own whimsical interpretation.
He was the Pope. Would that be too strong?
Well, he would be the Muslim Supreme Council of the Palestinian areas over there. Umar Declaration is very clear. The second caliph in Islam, one of the 10 promised to go to paradise in Islam. Umar clearly says that Jews must put yellow patches on their right shoulder. Most Americans don't know that the yellow patch on the Jewish right shoulder in Nazi Germany did not come from Nazi Germany. It came as an adoption from Spain because the Muslims ruled Spain. And if you compare the edicts that was issued by Umar ibn al-Khattab, which Hajj Amin al-Husseini also taught the Nazis, you find them to be almost exact. Jews must never enter into a Muslim bathhouse in the Umar Declaration. Jews must never enter into a German restaurant. Jews must never be a judge over Muslims. Jews must never be a judge over Germans. Jews must pay double the taxation in Nazi Germany. Jews must pay the jizya in accordance to the Quran. حتى يدفعوا الجزية عن يد وهم صاغرون, that they pay the taxation by an upper hand. May they be belittled. This is from the Quran itself. So Hajj Amin al-Husseini collaborated on the eve of the final solution. You should see his picture right there with Hitler. Most Americans do not know that the Nazi war machine was composed of 8 different Nazi divisions, 2 of which were Muslim fundamentalist. The Khanzar division, Bosnian, the Albanian division. They destroyed 90%